For 8 long years, from 58 to 50 BC, Julius Caesar waged a war that would literally reshape the map of Europe. It was this brutal, methodical campaign that brought the huge territories of Gaul under Roman control. And here's the thing, almost the entire story we have of this war comes from just one person, Caesar himself. So, let's dive into the conquest of Gaul, a story of incredible strategy, shocking brutality, and some of the most brilliant propaganda ever written.
Right from the get-go, Caesar kicks off his account with this legendary line. Now, this isn't just a geography lesson, not at all. It's a strategic assessment. He's immediately showing you that Gaul isn't one big unified country. It's a fractured land of tribes who are often rivals. And for a guy like Caesar, a master of divide and conquer, a divided Gaul, well, it was practically an open invitation.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. We'll follow Caesar's campaign through 5 main phases. We're going to start with the excuse he used to get involved in the first place. Watch how he just systematically takes down tribe after tribe. See him push the boundaries of what the Romans even thought was the known world. Then face a massive unified revolt that almost kicked him out for good. And finally, witness the absolutely brutal price of that conquest.
You know, every war needs a reason, right? Or at least a story you can sell as a reason. And Caesar found his in the mass migration of an entire people. The whole saga of the Gallic Wars kicks off not with a Roman invasion, but with the desperate journey of a tribe called the Helvetii.
So get this, Caesar records this number. 368,000 people, that's men, women, and children. The Helvetii and their allies basically decided their homeland was too small, so they torched their own villages and set off to find a new place to live. I mean, this was a whole nation on the move, something nobody had really seen before. And Caesar saw it as both a major threat and the perfect excuse to step in.
And Caesar's response? It was just unbelievably fast and, frankly, kind of insane. He doesn't just meet them with soldiers, he meets them with engineering. In a matter of days, his army builds this massive, 19-mile-long defensive line of walls and trenches to block their path. So, you see what he's doing? He's framing his first big move not as an attack, but as a purely defensive action to protect Rome's allies. It's brilliant PR.
And then, this is the number we're left with at the end of his campaign against them. After chasing them down and crushing them in battle, a count of the survivors was taken. Out of those original 368,000 people, only 110,000 were left. Caesar then forces them to go all the way back to their burned-out homes, partly to act as a buffer against other tribes. The message couldn't have been clearer. Roman power is absolute.
So, you'd think after dealing with a Helvetii crisis, Caesar might pack up and go home, right? Nope, not even close. He uses that momentum to pivot, turning his legions against other powerful groups he labels as threats. First the Germans under their chieftain Ariovistus, and then this incredibly tough confederation of tribes to the north, known as the Belgae.
This was the challenge thrown down by the German chieftain Ariovistus. You have to understand, the Germans were legendary warriors. Even the Gauls were terrified of them. So Ariovistus's defiance was a direct poke at Roman dominance. Caesar, of course, accepted the challenge, and in a massive battle, his legions smashed the German forces and drove them all the way back across the Rhine River.
But the hardest fight was still on the horizon. The Belgae, and specifically a tribe called the Nervi, were known as the fiercest warriors in all of Gaul, and they proved it. They ambushed Caesar's legions while they were trying to set up camp, and it just evolved into absolute chaos. The situation was so bad, so utterly desperate, that Caesar himself had to grab a shield and run to the front lines just to rally his troops. The only thing that saved them from total annihilation was that legendary Roman discipline, drilled into every last soldier.
And right in the middle of all that chaos, Caesar gives us this incredible little story that just perfectly captures the spirit of his army. It's about 2 of his centurions, Pulfio and Varenus, who are apparently always at each other's throats, competing for the next promotion. So in the heat of the battle, Pulfio charges in, gets himself into a jam, and Varenus runs in to save him. Then, of course, Varenus slips and gets into trouble, and who comes to the rescue? Pulfio. They both make it back to camp as heroes. It's a fantastic little snapshot of how their rivalry also created this fierce bond.
Okay, so by this point, Gaul is largely subdued. Any other Roman general would have called it a day. But Caesar, well, Caesar was a showman. His next moves weren't just about strategy, they were about pure spectacle, designed to blow the minds of his enemies and, maybe more importantly, the politicians back in Rome. He was about to go where no Roman army had ever gone before.
To make a point to some German tribes, Caesar decided to cross the Rhine River. But he's not just going to use boats. Oh no, that's not flashy enough. In just 10 days, his military engineers built a massive timber bridge across this wide, powerful river. It was a feat of engineering that was basically impossible, and it was a statement. There is nowhere you can hide from us. No barrier can stop Rome.
And if that wasn't enough, the next year he does something even crazier. He uses the excuse that some Britons had been helping the Gauls, and he launches the first Roman invasion of Britain. We're talking about a place that was, to the Romans, the literal edge of the world, a land of myth. Did he conquer it? Not really. But that wasn't the point. The story back home? Oh, it was a smash hit. Caesar was now Caesar the Explorer, pushing the very boundaries of the known world.
And you can just imagine the folks back in Rome eating this stuff up. He's sending back these reports describing the bizarre customs of the Britons. Warriors who paint their bodies blue with a plant called woad. Their strange diets, their interesting family structures. This wasn't just a dry military report. It was an adventure story, and it was making him a living legend.
So just when Caesar thinks he's got Gaul all wrapped up, that it's finally pacified, the whole place just explodes. All those years of Roman occupation and brutality finally boil over, and the scattered Gallic tribes find the one thing they'd been missing all along, a single, brilliant leader to unite them.
His name was Vercingetorix. He was this young, incredibly charismatic nobleman from the Arverni tribe, and he was both a masterful politician and a completely ruthless commander. He managed to do the impossible. He built a grand Gallic alliance, getting old rivals to bury the hatchet and fight for one common cause, to kick the Romans out of Gaul for good. For the very first time, Caesar wasn't fighting a divided Gaul. He was fighting a united one.
And you can really see the clash between these two great minds at the siege of the town of Avaricum. Vercingetorix pushes for this brutal but brilliant strategy, a scorched earth policy. Burn your own towns and fields so the Roman army, which was always hungry, would starve. But the townspeople of Avaricum begged him to spare their beautiful city, and he gave in. Caesar, on the other hand, did what Romans do best. He built. His legions constructed this absolutely enormous siege ramp, a testament to the slow, grinding, relentless power of the Roman war machine.
But Vercingetorix would soon hand Caesar one of the greatest humiliations of his career. It happened at Gergovia, Vercingetorix's own hometown. Caesar had planned a clever feint to draw the defenders out, but his legionaries, totally high on their own success and just itching for plunder, flat out ignored the signal to pull back. They charged the walls, ran straight into a trap, and were thrown back with huge losses. It was a rare, stinging, and very public defeat for Caesar.
And the price for that arrogance was paid in blood. Caesar tells this heartbreaking story of a centurion named Marcus Petreius, who sacrificed himself to save his men. He got overwhelmed at one of the gates, and he basically told his men, "Get out of here, save yourselves," while he held the enemy off, fighting to his last breath. His last words really just hammer home the terrible cost of his soldiers' greed.
Now here is where Caesar shows his political genius. He takes this military disaster and turns it into a masterclass in leadership. The next day, he gets the whole army together, not to punish them, but to teach them. He publicly calls them out for their recklessness, reminding them that a good Roman soldier needs discipline and self-control just as much as courage. And in doing so, he completely reestablishes his authority and makes the army's loyalty to him even stronger. The Great Gallic Revolt all came down to one final epic confrontation, the Siege of Alesia. And what Caesar did here is one of the most astonishing things in all of military history. Vercingetorix and his 80,000 warriors were holed up in the fortress of Alesia. So Caesar builds a wall all the way around them, an 11-mile ring of trenches, towers, and traps. But then, he gets word that a gigantic Gallic relief army is coming to rescue Vercingetorix. So what does he do? He builds a second wall, this one 13 miles long, facing outwards. His army is now literally sandwiched between the fortress and the relief army. The fighting was just unimaginable, a desperate, bloody battle on two fronts at once. But in the end, Roman engineering and Roman discipline won. Vercingetorix, watching from the walls as the rescue army was shattered against the Roman defenses, knew it was over. He surrendered in the most dramatic way possible, riding out alone and throwing his weapons down at Caesar's feet.
With Vercingetorix defeated, the revolt was essentially broken. But for the few pockets of resistance that held out, Caesar's approach changed. This wasn't about strategy anymore. It was about pure punishment. And the siege of a little town called Uxellodunum is a chilling final chapter. Taking the town wasn't enough for him. He needed to make an example of them, an example so terrible that all of Gaul would never forget the price of defiance. Here, instead of a big, heroic assault, he does something so cold and calculated. He targets the town's only source of water. His engineers dug a series of tunnels to find and divert the underground spring that fed the town's fountain. When the water just suddenly stopped, the Gauls didn't think it was engineering. They thought the gods themselves had turned against them. Utterly broken and dying of thirst, they surrendered. And then Caesar had the hands of all the surviving fighting men cut off, leaving them as living, walking warnings for the rest of Gaul.
So in the end, this incredible story we have, the commentaries on the Gallic War, is our main source for all of this. It's a textbook on military genius for sure, but it's also a masterfully written piece of political propaganda written by the guy who won. And that leaves us with a big question. Who was the real Caesar? Was he a hero, bringing Roman law and civilization to barbarians? Was he a ruthless, genocidal conqueror, responsible for the deaths of maybe 1 million Gauls? Or was his greatest skill of all just telling his own story so damn well that he's defined his own legacy for the last 2,000 years?